You've been doing too much. Here's what happens when you stop. In the midst of movement and chaos, keep stillness inside of you. These words by Deepak Chopra echo the timeless truth Carl Jung once uncovered, that doing more isn't always the answer sometimes. Your soul is just asking you to let go. At Spiritual Wisdom, today's video dives into the transformative power of surrender. What if your next breakthrough isn't in pushing harder, but in pausing deeper? As you listen, consider how these principles could reshape your daily life, your stress, your healing, your happiness. Have you ever experienced peace by doing less? Share your story in the comments below, and let's explore this spiritual awakening together. 1. Doing too much blocks inner growth. Carl Jung believed that when you are constantly doing, striving, and chasing outcomes, you are not living from your soul, but from your ego's fear of stillness and loss of control. In our modern world, the obsession with productivity has become a mask for deeper avoidance. We run faster, we push harder, we fill every space with action, not because we are aligned, but because we are terrified of what might surface in the silence. And yet, it is in that very silence that the soul begins to speak. It speaks not through loud declarations, but through subtle inner shifts, through dreams, through deep knowing, through the ache you feel when you're far from your true path. When you are constantly doing too much, you block the wisdom of the unconscious. You override your intuition, and you remain trapped in loops that keep you externally busy but internally disconnected. This is the paradox Jung uncovered. The more you force life, the more it resists you, not because you're wrong, but because the soul doesn't evolve through force. It evolves through surrender. Letting go isn't a weakness. It's the bravest thing your nervous system can do. It's the moment your inner world unclenches. And in that release, space is made for real growth to happen. Not the kind of growth that pleases others, but the kind that brings you home to yourself. Jung taught that the unconscious is the gateway to transformation, but you cannot hear its voice if you're always chasing. Sometimes the reason you feel stuck isn't because you're not doing enough. It's because you've done too much for too long without listening. When you stop micromanaging the outcomes and allow space for grace, you begin to realign with your own natural rhythm. You stop performing for validation and start living in alignment. You stop trying to prove your worth and start honoring your soul. And this is when the true alchemy begins, when the external noise fades and the internal wisdom rises. The moment you stop trying to control life is the moment you remember that the soul was never meant to be caged by the ego's demands. It was meant to lead. Are you ready to stop striving and start listening to your inner truth? If so, comment below. I will surrender to affirm your commitment to releasing control and allowing true spiritual growth to unfold. 2. Stillness is not laziness. It's alignment. Stillness is not laziness. It's alignment. And Carl Jung understood this truth far deeper than most of us are ever taught to see. In a world that idolizes hustle and glorifies exhaustion, we've been tricked into thinking that our worth is tied to our productivity. We are constantly doing, achieving, managing, fixing, believing that if we just keep moving, we'll eventually arrive at peace. But what if peace isn't something you chase? What if peace is something you remember, something you return to, and that return only begins when you finally stop running. Jung emphasized the concept of Wu Wei, the Taoist principle of effortless action, not doing nothing, but doing with flow, with inner alignment, without resistance. This doesn't mean passivity. It means trusting that the soul has its own intelligence, its own timing, and when we stop interfering, life often unfolds in the most extraordinary ways. You might be carrying too much right now: responsibilities, guilt, expectations, pressure to be everything for everyone. And you might have confused that heaviness with purpose. But Carl Jung taught that when we become overly identified with the ego's need to act, to control, to solve, we lose access to the voice of the unconscious, the deeper, wiser part of us that speaks not in words, but in symbols, sensations, and stillness. In silence, the soul surfaces. In pause, insight appears. One modern example that echoes Jung's teachings is the growing number of people today who find themselves on the edge of burnout, despite having everything they thought they wanted. They followed the formula, worked hard, stayed busy, ticked all the boxes, but feel hollow inside. That hollowness is not failure. It's the soul's rebellion. It's life saying, stop doing so much and start listening again. I once met a man in his early 40s who had spent 2 decades building a successful business. From the outside, he had it all. But internally, he was crumbling. Anxiety attacks, sleepless nights, a constant sense of dread he couldn't explain. He told me that the moment things began to shift wasn't when he hired more staff or fixed his schedule. It was when he took 2 weeks off and sat by the ocean, doing absolutely nothing. At first, he felt worthless. But by the end, he said it was like hearing his soul for the first time in 20 years. Jung would have said that he finally allowed the unconscious to breathe. He stopped being a machine and remembered he was a human being, a soul with depth, not just a mind with a to-do list. Stillness, then, is not an escape from life. It is life in its truest form. It's the sacred threshold where you stop reacting and start feeling, where you stop pushing and start flowing, where you stop seeking approval and finally hear your own voice again. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious is not some passive space. It is the fertile soil of transformation. But we can't access that soil if we're constantly walking on top of it. We have to be still long enough for the roots of insight to grow. The most powerful shifts in your spiritual and emotional life don't come when you're forcing change. They come when you surrender to something deeper, something ancient inside you that already knows the way. So if you feel exhausted, not just in body, but in soul, that's not a weakness. That's a signal. That's your system begging for alignment. You've been doing too much, not too little. And your healing doesn't begin with more effort. It begins with stillness. When you finally let go, you don't fall apart. You fall into place. 3. Ego versus self. Forcing versus flow. The ego is always in a rush. It wants results, recognition, and control. It chases goals that look impressive, but feel empty, pushing you to prove your worth by how much you do, how fast you move, and how perfect you appear. But Carl Jung reminded us that this constant doing is not power. It's a mask for fear. The ego craves speed, but the self, which Jung saw as the whole of your psyche, including the unconscious and spiritual dimensions, moves with intention, not urgency. It doesn't strive to dominate. It longs to integrate. It seeks truth, not applause. And while the ego screams through endless activity, the self speaks in silence. in the quiet pause between moments, where the soul begins to stir and healing begins to take root. When you live through ego, life becomes a performance. You're always acting, striving, reaching, but never arriving. You feel disconnected, like something essential is missing, even when everything on the outside appears successful. That's because the ego measures growth by how far you've gone, but the self asks how deeply you've come home to yourself. As long as you're caught in this performance, your spiritual path becomes distorted. You confuse movement with progress, and you forget how to listen. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And that awakening doesn't happen through force, it happens through flow. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about remembering that the truest parts of you emerge not when you push harder, but when you surrender deeper. Like nature, your soul operates on divine timing. No flower blooms all year. There's a sacred rhythm to everything real, and forcing it only tears the roots. The deeper spiritual transformation comes when you stop grasping for certainty and start embracing presence. Doing less doesn't mean you're lazy. It means you're aligned. Stillness is not weakness. It's where your energy refines, where your intuition sharpens, and where your real power begins to rise. The modern world rewards the hustle, but your soul is calling for stillness. The path forward is not about becoming more, but about unbecoming what you're not. When you finally let go of the ego's expectations, you stop chasing and start attracting. You become magnetic, not because you're striving, but because you're rooted. As Rumi said, try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. The moment you stop trying to control everything is the moment you make room for your spiritual self to lead. And that's where true transformation begins. Have you ever paused to notice whether you're living from your ego or your true self? If so, share your insights in the comments below. We'd love to hear your experience. If not, comment, "I choose flow," to begin aligning with the deeper wisdom within. Let's grow together on this spiritual path toward authenticity and transformation. 4. Shadow work happens when you pause. Stillness is not a sign of weakness, failure, or laziness. It is the soul's invitation to finally be heard beneath the noise. In a world obsessed with action, productivity, and constant motion, the idea of pausing can feel like self-betrayal. But Carl Jung reminded us, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And that awakening doesn't begin through striving. It begins the moment you surrender. Stop running and allow your inner world to rise to the surface. When you've been doing too much, when your days are spent fixing, chasing, managing, and controlling, there comes a moment when your spirit begins to fracture, not because you're not enough, but because you're doing too much of what disconnects you from your soul. Stillness brings discomfort because it opens the door to the shadow. And the shadow isn't evil. It's simply the parts of you that have been repressed, rejected, or forgotten. It's the sadness you never had time to feel, the anger you were taught to suppress, the dreams you shelved in the name of survival. When you finally pause, those parts come knocking, not to destroy you, but to be reintegrated. Jung taught that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The pain you feel in stillness is not an error. It's a signal that you're ready to heal. You're no longer numbing. You're no longer escaping. You're finally witnessing. And witnessing is the soul's first language. Healing begins not when you fix your inner wounds, but when you allow yourself to sit with them without judgment. When you hold your own heart with compassion instead of criticism, integration begins to unfold naturally. You stop treating your emotions as problems and begin to see them as messengers. That moment of presence is when the soul begins to return home. And the more you stay present with what arises, the more you realize that you were never broken, only buried. The paradox is that when you stop doing, you start becoming. You begin to sense the subtle intelligence of your soul guiding you toward wholeness, not through effort, but through surrender. The shadow becomes your teacher, not your enemy. The chaos softens, and in that sacred stillness, you discover that peace was never something to be earned. It was something waiting beneath the noise all along. You realize that letting go is not about giving up, but about giving in to the deeper rhythm of your own truth. Every time you pause, breathe, and choose to be present with what is, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You retrieve the energy you once scattered, trying to be everything to everyone. You remember that your worth is not tied to how much you accomplish, but how deeply you connect with your truth, your heart, your soul. This isn't spiritual bypassing. This is spiritual returning. The soul does not ask you to do more. It asks you to feel more, to trust more, and to surrender the illusion that you are only valuable when you're producing, fixing, or pleasing. So the next time stillness scares you, don't run. Stay. Listen. Let your pain speak. Let your past rise. Let your emotions guide you inward. Because when you finally let go, you don't fall apart, you fall into alignment. And that is when your soul, long silenced by the noise of doing, begins to sing. 5. Synchronicity arises in surrender. Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity, those deeply meaningful coincidences that seem to carry a message from the universe, doesn't arise when we're pushing, striving, or clinging to control. It shows up when we finally pause, surrender, and allow life to flow from the soul rather than the ego. You may have been taught that success only comes through constant effort, but Jung's spiritual insight turns that belief on its head. The more you try to manipulate outcomes and micromanage every detail of your journey, the more resistance you create. Synchronicity isn't attracted to force. It's magnetized by inner alignment. When your soul is at peace, when you're no longer chasing, life mirrors that calmness back to you in symbolic, mysterious, and often miraculous ways. Just think of the moments when, out of nowhere, the right person calls, the perfect opportunity arises, or you stumble across a message that speaks directly to what you needed most. That's not random. It's a response to your surrender. Carl Jung believed that the soul doesn't communicate through noise or control, but through symbols, dreams, emotions, and silence. One woman I spoke with had spent years obsessing over manifesting her dream career, pouring her energy into vision boards, cold calls, and productivity hacks. Nothing seemed to work. But when she burned out and finally surrendered, choosing instead to heal, meditate, and simply live, the phone rang with an unexpected job offer from a company she had long forgotten she applied to. It wasn't just any job, it aligned with her purpose, her passions, and her values. That's how synchronicity works. It steps in the moment we step back. When we stop interfering with the natural flow of things, the spiritual current begins to carry us. The soul thrives not in tension, but in trust. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means giving space for a higher intelligence to move. Carl Jung reminds us that the unconscious mind, the deeper layers of the psyche, are always communicating with us, but we have to be quiet enough to listen. And when we do, life responds not through logic, but through serendipity, symbols, and spiritual nudges that guide us in the right direction. So if you've been doing too much, overthinking, overextending, overplanning, it might be time to do the most radical thing of all. Nothing. Step into stillness. Listen, align, and trust that the soul already knows the way. If this message resonated with your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced synchronicity after letting go? Let's explore the mystery of alignment together. 6. Trusting the unconscious is a radical act. Trusting the unconscious is not just a concept, it is a deeply spiritual invitation to step away from the constant need to control and finally surrender to something greater than your intellect. Carl Jung taught us that the unconscious isn't chaos. It's a vast, mysterious intelligence that holds more wisdom than the conscious mind could ever access. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in fleeting moments of intuition, and yet most people never hear its messages because they're too busy doing, always chasing. In a world where productivity is praised and stillness is mistaken for laziness, the soul is often silenced beneath the noise of constant motion. You rush from task to task, convinced that more action will bring clarity or safety, but in doing so, you disconnect from the very part of yourself that knows the truth, the spiritual truth. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That is the danger of constant doing. You become a stranger to your own soul and mistake the external world as the only source of meaning. When you slow down, truly slow down, you begin to notice the subtle ways your inner life has been trying to speak to you all along. That anxious feeling in your chest wasn't just stress, it was your soul crying out for realignment. That recurring dream wasn't random. It was a message from your deeper self, begging you to pay attention. The unconscious does not reveal itself through force. It unfolds through presence. You cannot schedule a breakthrough. You cannot demand revelation. You must create the space for it to arrive. And that space is born out of humility, out of the willingness to stop pushing and simply listen. In today's world, that act of surrender is radical. It means rejecting the hustle, if only for a moment, and choosing instead to sit with the unknown, to trust that not knowing is a form of wisdom. Surrender is often misunderstood as weakness, but it's actually a fierce kind of strength. It's the spiritual power of letting go, not because you failed, but because you finally realized that your soul cannot be led by force. It must be felt, followed, honored. This is why so many people feel burned out, stuck, emotionally numb, because they've been living according to the mind's agenda while ignoring the soul's longing. When you give yourself permission to stop, to breathe, to drop beneath the surface of your thoughts, you open a doorway to something sacred. The unconscious begins to rise, not as confusion, but as clarity, not as noise, but as guidance. And in that space, you may begin to realize that you've been doing too much, not because you were wrong, but because you were afraid of what silence might reveal. But the silence is not empty. It is full of truth. Jung believed that transformation begins when you stop trying to fix yourself and instead allow your true self to emerge from within. This is the spiritual essence of letting go. It is not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of deep trust. Trust in your inner voice. Trust in the timing of your life. Trust in the divine unfolding that doesn't need your interference, only your awareness. And in that awareness, you'll find that everything you've been chasing already lives inside you waiting, not to be earned through effort, but remembered through stillness. 7. Transformation requires patience, not pressure. Transformation is not an event. It's a soul's unfolding, a sacred process that Carl Jung likened to alchemy, where lead is not turned into gold in a single moment, but through gradual, often invisible phases. In a world that glorifies instant gratification and measurable progress, this truth can feel deeply unsettling, especially if you're used to achieving, fixing, and controlling every outcome. But spiritual wisdom reminds us that real change is not born from pressure. It blossoms from patience. When you finally stop pushing yourself to transform on someone else's timeline, or even your own ego's demands, you begin to align with the deeper rhythm of your soul. Jung believed that transformation occurs in the unconscious first, not in the visible world of doing, but in the quiet realm of being. When you resist the urge to escape discomfort or slap solutions on your emotional wounds, you actually make space for your inner world to reorganize itself organically. It's in that space where you don't have all the answers, where you feel uncertain, raw, even lost, that your true growth begins to take root. As Jung once said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This means that the soul doesn't evolve by bypassing pain or skipping steps. It grows stronger each time you choose to stay, breathe, and listen within. Think of it like winter slowly giving way to spring, not because someone forced it to, but because nature follows a sacred rhythm that cannot be rushed. The same is true for you. When you stop treating transformation as a to-do list and start honoring it as a spiritual unfolding, everything changes not outwardly at first, but inwardly, where the most important shifts happen. You may find that what once felt like stagnation was actually sacred stillness, and what looked like delay was your soul catching up with the life you were meant to live. This process demands trust, not in outcomes, but in the intelligence of the soul itself, which knows exactly when to release, when to rest, and when to rise. The more you pressure yourself to figure it all out, the more you delay the very healing that needs to occur in stillness. But when you surrender, when you soften your grip, sit in uncertainty, and allow your inner world to breathe, you invite the divine to participate in your evolution. And that is when transformation stops being something you try to do and becomes something you allow to happen through you. If you're still here with us, drop a comment below saying, "I'm trusting the process." Your presence matters, and your feedback helps us grow together on this path of transformation. 8. Doing nothing is a sacred practice. Carl Jung believed that doing nothing, when practiced with awareness, is not a waste of time, but a sacred act of spiritual return. In a world that worships busyness and equates self-worth with output, the simple act of stillness becomes radical. It is in the quiet, when we stop performing and producing, that the ego begins to dissolve and the soul starts to rise. You stop identifying with roles, achievements, or how others perceive you, and begin to recognize the quiet power of your own presence. You come to understand that your worth isn't something you earn, it's something you remember. Jung saw this as a process of spiritual purification, where the noise of the external world fades and the truth of your inner world is finally heard. The more you strip away the unnecessary doing, the more you meet the raw, unfiltered essence of who you really are. Take, for example, a woman named Sarah, successful by all conventional standards, yet quietly unraveling inside. She had spent years chasing productivity, achievements, and validation, believing they would fill the void. But they never did. One day, overwhelmed and exhausted, she chose to unplug completely and spend 3 days in silence. No phone, no emails, no obligations, just the unfamiliar sound of her own breath. At first, the stillness terrified her, but then came the tears. Not from pain, but from the shock of feeling herself for the first time in years. In doing nothing, she realized she hadn't lost herself. She had simply been too busy to hear her soul whispering beneath the noise. That weekend didn't fix her life, but it gave her something far more valuable: awareness. Awareness that she didn't need to prove her worth. She just needed to return to it. Carl Jung taught that the soul doesn't scream for your attention, it waits. It doesn't need you to achieve or perform to be worthy of your own love. In fact, the more you push, strive, and control, the more disconnected you become from what truly matters. Letting go, therefore, is not giving up, it's waking up. When you surrender the need to control every outcome, you begin to trust the natural unfolding of life. You begin to see that you are not behind or broken. You are simply being asked to rest in your being. In that sacred pause, creativity returns, clarity rises, emotional wounds begin to mend, because the soul, as Jung said, speaks in silence, symbols, and dreams, not in metrics, deadlines, or perfection. And when you finally stop doing, you begin to remember that peace was never something to chase. It was always something to allow. So if you're exhausted from carrying too much, maybe it's time to stop. Not because you failed, but because your soul is asking you to. Let your healing begin in the stillness. Let your clarity be born in the quiet. Because according to Carl Jung, doing nothing isn't a break from life, it's where life truly begins. 9. The soul speaks in stillness, not striving. When you stop striving, chasing, fixing, or performing for the world, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your true self slowly rises from the depths of your being. Carl Jung understood this truth when he said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." The soul doesn't emerge through noise, urgency, or effort. It awakens through stillness, through the sacred pause where the unconscious finally breathes, and the spiritual dimension of your being can begin to speak. We've been conditioned to believe that the more we do, the more worthy we become. But this is the great illusion. In reality, the deepest transformation begins not in effort, but in allowing. The moment you stop trying to be someone for others and start resting in your essence, your entire frequency changes. Stillness is not a void. It's a sacred space where clarity begins, where your intuition whispers, and where your past wounds begin to unravel in the quiet embrace of presence. In that spiritual silence, you begin to hear the truth that was buried under years of noise and conditioning. The soul doesn't rush. It doesn't scream. It remembers. And in that remembering, you realize you were never broken, only buried beneath layers of survival patterns, people-pleasing, and unconscious striving. Letting go isn't giving up. It's waking up. It's returning to a frequency that feels like peace without needing proof, love without performance, and worth without achievement. The ego fears this stillness because it cannot control it. But the soul flourishes in it because this is where it finds God, source, spirit, whatever you choose to call the sacred. When you finally stop, you don't collapse, you expand. You don't fade, you illuminate. And suddenly, you're no longer chasing your path. You're walking it with presence, with grace, and with a quiet kind of power that doesn't need to be explained to be felt. You don't need to be seen by the world to know who you are. The soul doesn't need an audience. It only needs alignment. Letting go of the need to constantly do is one of the most spiritual acts of rebellion in a world addicted to noise. It's a radical return to the self, a remembrance that you are already whole, already enough, already in rhythm with the greater unfolding. And when you truly understand this, you stop looking for signs and start becoming one. The moment you release the grip of control, you open your hands to receive everything that was meant for you all along. Not because you chased it, but because you aligned with it. And that is where your soul begins to lead. To affirm your devotion to inner stillness, comment below, "I choose stillness." Let this be your quiet vow to listen more deeply, trust your soul, and inspire others to do the same. Thank you for joining us on this journey into Carl Jung's powerful insight. That true transformation doesn't come from doing more, but from learning to let go. If today's message helped you pause, reflect, or feel more aligned with your soul's deeper rhythm, we invite you to become part of our growing community. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of clarity, healing, and awakening in our future videos. Let go and let your soul lead. 10 signs you're both thinking about each other right now. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt someone's presence so strongly, even when they're not around? That moment when your heart stirs for no reason, your thoughts drift to a specific person, and deep down, you sense they're thinking of you too. In this video from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore 10 powerful signs that reveal a mutual, psychic connection between souls, something Carl Jung deeply understood through the lens of synchronicity and the collective unconscious. As you listen, reflect on your own experiences. Have you ever felt this invisible bond with someone? Comment below with, "I've felt it," if any of these signs resonate with your soul, and share your own story. Let's begin this journey inward, because recognizing these signs could be the key to your own spiritual growth, emotional clarity, and a deeper understanding of the invisible threads that connect us all. 1. Mutual thought is real and symbolic, not coincidence. Carl Jung believed that when two people think of each other at the same time, it's not just a coincidence, it's a sign of something deeper, psychic resonance. It means their unconscious minds are silently communicating through emotion, symbols, and synchronicity beyond logic, beyond distance, and beyond time. You may think it's just a random memory when someone suddenly enters your thoughts, but Jung's insight reveals that your soul is picking up on an energetic signal. It's not just you remembering them, it's them remembering you too, and your soul is listening. These moments are often charged with emotion. You might feel an intense wave come over you for no reason, a sudden ache in your chest, a sense of longing, or even a burst of joy. That's not imagination. That's the resonance. It's as if your inner world is mirroring theirs. Jung taught that the unconscious speaks through archetypes and dreams, and when two souls are bonded, they can communicate symbolically across invisible planes. This can happen through synchronicity, those strange, meaningful coincidences that defy rational explanation. You think of someone, and then a song that reminds you of them plays. You dream of them, and the next day, they call or text. You feel their presence, even when they're not around. These aren't accidents, they're spiritual signals, expressions of the soul's language. The more emotionally significant the bond, the stronger the current. Your thoughts act like beacons, and when they think of you too, that energetic connection lights up like a frequency being matched. Jung would call this the bridge between two psyches. And when both are tuned in, what's felt is not illusion, it's mutual soul contact. Sometimes, it arrives as a sudden inner pull. Your attention is drawn toward them without warning. Or maybe you've felt a shift in your mood that isn't yours, a mysterious feeling that seems to belong to someone else. In moments like that, it's very likely you're not just thinking of them, you're feeling their energy, because your souls are still in dialogue. It may even feel like a quiet telepathy. And if you pause long enough, you'll notice how often these moments happen when you're emotionally open or still, as if your soul needs silence to hear theirs. Jung believed that these deep psychic links form especially in relationships that carry strong emotional weight, whether it's unresolved love, karmic ties, or even soul contracts. The connection can persist even when there's no physical contact. Time doesn't sever it. Distance doesn't dull it. That's because the soul operates in a realm where time is circular and energy is the currency. So when you find yourself unable to stop thinking of them and the signs begin to show up everywhere, don't rush to explain it away. You're not going crazy. You're simply experiencing the invisible tether of two souls acknowledging each other across dimensions. The connection is real. Your feelings are real. And if your soul feels it, trust that theirs might be feeling it too. If you believe that mutual thought is more than coincidence and you're ready to explore the deeper language of the soul, comment below. I feel the connection to affirm your journey into psychic resonance and spiritual awakening. 2. The collective unconscious creates psychic links. Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious reveals that we are all interconnected through a deep symbolic realm that transcends language, distance, and time. When you suddenly think of someone and feel a surge of emotion without any external trigger, it's often because both of you are subconsciously tapping into the same archetypal energy. Whether it's that of a lover, a twin soul, or even a shadow bond. These aren't just memories or random thoughts. They're messages carried through a shared psychic field, a language of symbols and emotions that bypasses logic. This is why two people can think of each other at the exact same moment, dream of one another on the same night, or experience a synchronicity that ties their timelines together. You may be going about your ordinary day at work, folding laundry, or sipping coffee when suddenly a wave of feeling hits you. A name enters your mind. A song plays that reminds you of them, or your chest tightens like they're thinking of you too. These moments are not just emotional flukes. They are soul signals traveling through the fabric of Jung's collective unconscious, an invisible thread connecting your inner world to someone else's. In the real world, this often shows up in ways that make you pause. Maybe you keep seeing their initials everywhere. Maybe you get a text from them after months of silence, right after dreaming about them. Or perhaps you've been trying to forget them, yet you feel their presence at random times as if they're silently calling out to you from a distance. It's tempting to brush these moments off, to tell yourself you're imagining things or being dramatic. But Carl Jung would say otherwise. He believed that such psychic links are not only real, they're deeply meaningful. They point to unresolved energy, mutual longing, shared growth, or even mirrored wounds. And often, they are part of the individuation process, a journey where your soul seeks to become whole through reflection, connection, and sometimes through letting go. This idea becomes even more profound when we consider how disconnected modern life has become. With notifications, scrolling, and noise all around, it's easy to lose touch with the quiet signals of the soul. Yet despite the chaos, you might still find yourself waking up at 2 a.m. with their name in your heart, or walking down the street only to feel like someone is thinking about you. These are not coincidences. They are whispers from the unconscious, reminding you that connection isn't limited to physical interaction. You don't need a message to know someone is thinking of you. Sometimes, your spirit just knows. And that knowledge comes from a place that Carl Jung explored in depth, a place where the unconscious binds two souls through emotion, timing, and symbols. So the next time this happens to you, don't ignore it. Ask yourself, what is this connection showing me? What part of me is being reflected back through them? Am I still holding on to something? Or am I being called to honor a bond that's evolving, transforming, or completing its purpose? These moments are not there to confuse you. They are invitations to listen to your soul more closely. Because in Jungian terms, when your unconscious lights up with memory, longing, or spiritual pull, it's rarely without reason. It's the manifestation of connection at its most mystical and intimate level. 3. Synchronicities reveal the hidden bond. When you think about someone and their name suddenly shows up on a billboard, in a song lyric, or in the middle of a conversation with someone else, that's not just coincidence, it's synchronicity, a spiritual alignment between your inner world and the outer one. Carl Jung called it a meaningful coincidence. But it's more than just timing. It's a reflection of an energetic bond that words can't quite capture. It's as if your soul is sending out a signal, and the universe replies with signs repeating numbers, shared dreams, spontaneous memories, or sudden emotional waves that make no rational sense. These signs aren't random. They're the language of spirit, confirming that someone else is thinking about you too. You feel them without touching them. You hear them without speaking. You sense them in the silence, in the symbols, in the synchronicities that won't leave you alone. When these signs start to cluster, like dreaming about someone and waking up to a message from them, or thinking about them and hearing your shared song in a store, it's not fantasy, it's frequency. Your energy is tuned to theirs. And the more spiritually awake you become, the more sensitive you are to this hidden dialogue between souls. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." That's why when you feel this energetic echo, it's your unconscious recognizing a mutual connection that's trying to surface. The mind may not always understand, but the heart always knows. Spiritual bonds don't rely on logic or proximity. They rely on energy. Two people can be miles apart, yet still feel each other's presence as if they never left. Have you ever suddenly felt a warmth in your chest or a tightening in your gut without knowing why, only to hear from that person later? That's the soul's radar. That's intuition aligning with reality. Einstein reminded us, everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. So when two souls are thinking of each other at the same time, that connection doesn't vanish into nothing. It vibrates through the field of consciousness until it manifests as synchronicity. It's the universe's way of saying, pay attention. Every repeated symbol is a spiritual breadcrumb. Every sign a whisper from something higher that affirms the invisible thread still exists between you. And sometimes, those signs won't stop until you acknowledge them. The more open you are to your spiritual nature, the clearer these signs become. Don't dismiss them. Don't rationalize them away. Feel them. Receive them. Because the spiritual world doesn't shout. It whispers through moments, numbers, lyrics, glances, and dreams. It teaches us that the real connection isn't always in the physical, but in the soul's ability to recognize itself in another, across space and time, through the mysterious rhythm of synchronicity. If you've ever felt the universe send you a sign, this message is for you. Comment below, "I trust divine synchronicity," if you're ready to recognize the hidden bonds that guide your path. 4. Strong emotions, dreams, and physical sensations are psychic clues. You may feel a sudden rush of sadness, joy, or longing without any clear trigger. Or perhaps you wake up from a dream so vivid and emotionally charged that it lingers with you all day. Your skin might erupt in goosebumps. Your heart may skip a beat, or you sense a strange warmth or pressure in your chest, as if someone just whispered your name from another realm. These aren't random moments. In the lens of Jungian psychology, they are psychic clues, energetic ripples from another soul who is thinking of you in that very moment. Carl Jung believed that when two souls are connected on a deep unconscious level, they can communicate without speaking, using dreams, emotions, and bodily sensations as their language. These moments are emotional echoes, imprints of another's presence in your energetic field. When you experience them, your soul is responding to a message from someone else's thoughts, someone who may be missing you, yearning for you, or simply remembering you with intensity. It's not always logical or explainable in physical terms, because the soul speaks through the symbolic, the emotional, the invisible. This is the realm where synchronicity lives, the meaningful coincidences that seem too precise to ignore. When your inner world shifts for no obvious reason, it may be because your soul is registering someone else's emotional frequency. Your body becomes the receiver, your dreams the canvas, your feelings the translation of an unseen interaction. These experiences often come with small signs: a clock striking at an unusual time, a familiar song playing out of nowhere, a scent that brings them back to you like a ghost of memory. And if you're truly attuned to your own emotional landscape, you'll notice how these signs don't feel random. They feel personal, intimate, like the invisible thread that still binds your soul to theirs is being tugged. Jung taught us to pay attention to symbols and to trust the unconscious, because the truth of a soul connection doesn't always reveal itself in words. It shows up in energy, in timing, in the way your heart reacts without permission. So if you've been thinking about someone and then feel something stir within you that you can't quite explain, trust that your soul might not be alone in that moment. They could be thinking about you too, sending a signal across the space between your bodies, straight into the core of your being and your soul. Always awake, always listening, and responding in kind. 5. Projection and inner archetypes. Explain the obsession. Have you ever wondered why someone lingers in your mind long after they're gone, as if their presence has carved itself into your soul? According to Carl Jung, it's not always about the person. It's about what they awaken in you. When two people meet and experience an intense connection, it often comes from something far deeper than shared interests or attraction. Jung's theory of projection helps explain this, how we unconsciously project our hidden desires, wounds, and unmet needs onto others. Within each man exists an inner feminine called the anima, and within each woman lives an inner masculine known as the animus. These archetypes are not just romantic fantasies, they're psychological blueprints formed by early childhood experiences, parental dynamics, and the emotional imprints of the past. So when someone steps into your life and instantly feels like home, it's usually because they embody your inner archetype. You're not simply drawn to them. You're drawn to the parts of yourself they unknowingly mirror. That's why it feels so soul deep. If both people are projecting at the same time, this creates an energetic loop that feels magnetic, divine, even fated. But it's not necessarily about them as a person. It's about the symbolic role they're playing in your inner world. You could meet someone once, share a short conversation, and yet they haunt your thoughts for years, not because they were your soulmate, but because they awakened a dormant part of your psyche. In real life, this looks like a man in a safe, routine life being completely captivated by a woman who radiates wildness, emotion, or mystery qualities he buried long ago. Or a woman stuck in over-responsibility, becoming infatuated with a carefree man who mirrors her suppressed desire for freedom. These people stir your soul because they activate something you've forgotten, rejected, or longed for in silence. Jung warned that unless we become aware of these inner dynamics, we will continue to fall for projections and call it destiny. This is why some of the most intense relationships burn fast and leave emotional ashes behind. They weren't meant to complete you. They were meant to reveal you. The obsession, the psychic pull, the inability to let go, it's not always a sign to run after them. It's often a sign to run inward. What is this person mirroring back to me? What part of myself do I need to reclaim, heal, or reintegrate? When you take back the energy you've projected, you reclaim your power. You no longer chase shadows. You become whole. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. If you're ready to explore your inner archetypes and stop chasing projections, comment below. I am ready to meet my true self. 6. Mutual thinking can be triggered during emotional shifts or transformation. During intense emotional transitions, whether it's heartbreak, personal growth, grief, or a spiritual awakening, your unconscious becomes more active, and certain people begin to resurface in your thoughts, not by chance, but because they were deeply tied to who you once were. They weren't just people, they were emotional anchors, mirrors of your old self, containers of energy from a time when your soul was still learning how to carry certain emotions. And the reason they come to mind now is because something within you is shifting, evolving, transforming, and in that transformation, the soul reaches backward to reconcile what was once unfinished, what was once deeply felt. Carl Jung believed that these moments are not random. He called them synchronicities, psychic events that mirror something meaningful within. So if you suddenly start thinking about someone during a time of change, chances are they're thinking about you too. That connection is not always logical, but it is spiritual. It's energy responding to energy, vibration calling to vibration. The emotional imprint they left on you is being reactivated, not because you're stuck in the past, but because your evolution has brought you full circle. Think about how, during heartbreak or awakening, people you haven't seen in years suddenly appear in your dreams, or you feel compelled to look them up, or their name shows up unexpectedly. It's not coincidence, it's resonance. The soul operates beyond time, and those you share deep emotional experiences with remain energetically bonded to your inner world. Sometimes, this mutual thinking is the soul's way of releasing something that was never fully processed. Other times, it's a signal that the connection still matters on a spiritual level. Just like Rumi said, don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day, your pain will become your cure. These connections that resurface in moments of emotional movement are not there to haunt you. They are there to guide you into healing, into clarity, into self-acceptance. They remind you that your story is layered, and no version of you ever disappears without a trace. And if they're thinking about you too, it's because their soul is catching the ripple of yours. It's a sacred echo, not a coincidence. So trust that in your spiritual evolution, the mind will sometimes bring the heart back to those who helped shape it, not to stay, but to understand. 7. Telepathic signs suggest inner dialogue. You might finish their sentences before they say a word, feel a deep emotion out of nowhere, only to later find out they were experiencing the exact same thing, or suddenly know they're about to message you, and they do. Carl Jung called this psychic simultaneity, not magic, but a symbolic synchronicity, where two psyches are so aligned that they vibrate at the same unconscious frequency. It's not about fantasy or delusion. It's about soul resonance, where thoughts, emotions, and energetic signals move silently between two people without the need for words. This kind of connection is not rare when the bond is soul deep. It's when your nervous system reacts to theirs without permission, when your dreams become shared messages, and when your intuition becomes a bridge that transmits what they feel before they even admit it to themselves. These are not coincidences. They are psychological echoes of a spiritual link that Jung believed could not be explained by time or space. You think of them, and they call. You feel their sadness before they speak. You sense their pull as if your body was wired to their emotional current. The soul speaks a language older than words, one made of energy, symbol, and emotion. And when two souls are bound in this way, what you're experiencing is unconscious communication at its purest. Jung said that the psyche is not contained within the individual, but shared through a collective unconscious, meaning your bond may be written in layers of archetypal memory and timeless emotion. You don't need proof, because your entire being already feels it. This connection creates a rhythm, one that beats beneath the surface of your ordinary life, whispering truths when silence falls. You may not understand how you knew, but your soul does. You may not see the evidence, but you feel the pulse. And this pulse is a sacred frequency, a reminder that the bond you share isn't imagined. It's encoded in the way your thoughts mirror each other, your hearts respond to one another, and your energies collide without permission. When your soul is in tune with someone else's, thinking about them is never a one-way street. It's a mirror, and every reflection is a message sent and received through the invisible threads of your shared consciousness. Do you feel the connection before it even happens? If you believe in this silent soul dialogue, declare it in the comments. Our souls speak beyond words, and I believe. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of spiritual wisdom. 8. Creative and life decisions may be shaped by the bond. When you find yourself making creative choices, shifting your lifestyle, or feeling emotionally pulled in a direction that seems to revolve around someone you're no longer connected to, it's not always about desire or obsession sometimes. It's your deeper self trying to speak through the bond. Carl Jung believed that certain people enter our lives not just to stay, but to serve as powerful symbols through which the unconscious communicates and initiates inner transformation. Their presence lingers not to haunt you, but to mirror back pieces of your identity you may have forgotten or suppressed. You might notice that your artistic expression subtly begins to reflect their energy colors, themes, or emotions you associate with them start showing up in your writing, painting, or music. Or perhaps you feel called to pivot in your career, chase something more meaningful, or emotionally mature in ways you never thought necessary before that connection. According to Jung, this isn't coincidence. It's a sacred psychological process where the other becomes a projection of your own inner landscape, a living metaphor guiding you toward growth. It's not them directing your life, it's your soul, using their image as a compass. In today's world, it might look like a woman who spent years in a sterile office, suddenly feeling drawn to humanitarian work because her thoughts keep circling back to someone she once loved who embodied that mission. Even though they've lost contact, the seed he planted in her consciousness now blossoms as a life of purpose. Jung would say that what she was really awakening was not about him. It was her inner archetype, her anima, calling her home. That's why these connections feel so intense and enduring, even without physical presence. The energy you feel is not a ghost, it's a guiding light. What appears to be fixation is often focused transformation. Your dreams, your urges, Your spontaneous decisions, they're not irrational. They're soul signals. The bond might never return in the form you once knew, but its symbolic power continues to sculpt your journey. As Carl Jung taught, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The real question is not whether they're thinking of you too, but what part of your true self they've helped you remember and what you're going to do with that. 9. The goal isn't reunion, it's integration. When someone occupies your thoughts so intensely it feels like they've become part of your emotional bloodstream, it's easy to believe the universe is urging a reunion. But Carl Jung offers a deeper, more spiritual truth. He called it archetypal possession, when a person outside of you becomes a symbol of something unresolved within. They're not just a person anymore. They've become a mirror, holding the image of an unintegrated part of your soul. The longing you feel may have little to do with them and everything to do with what they've stirred in you. Qualities you've lost, emotions you've buried, or desires you've been too afraid to claim. Jung taught that the unconscious speaks in symbols and relationships, and when you can't stop thinking about someone, your psyche is likely using them to draw your attention inward. Spiritually, this isn't an obsession, it's initiation. The person is a catalyst, not a destination. They may have awakened your creativity, courage, tenderness, or even your pain, but what matters is that it's yours. And the healing doesn't come by chasing them. It comes by reclaiming what they represent. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what happens when you mistake this kind of psychic intensity for romantic destiny. The truth is, the goal isn't reunion, it's integration. You're meant to withdraw the projection, retrieve your energy, and become whole again. That's when everything shifts. You begin to think about them without aching. You feel love without clinging. You remember them not as the one who got away, but as the one who showed you a piece of yourself you had forgotten. And as that piece reintegrates, you no longer need them to feel complete, because your soul has already come home. This is what spiritual growth looks like. It's messy, mysterious, and often disguised as heartbreak. But beneath the pain lies transformation. You stop reaching outward and start rising inward. And in that sacred return to self, you realize they weren't your answer. They were your mirror. The true reunion was never with them. It was with you. If this message resonated with your soul, affirm your healing journey in the comments. I reclaim my energy. I integrate the lessons. I am whole. 10. Mutual thinking leads you back to yourself. Have you ever found yourself thinking about someone so intensely, so vividly, that it almost feels like they're right there with you, only to discover later that they were thinking of you too? Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And that transformation is often sparked through what feels like a mutual psychic bond, a soul-level recognition that transcends logic and time. These moments of intense synchronicity aren't random. They are symbolic echoes of a deeper inner process, a sacred mirror showing you where your energy is flowing and where your becoming is taking shape. When you feel as though someone is living in your mind, occupying emotional real estate without invitation, what's truly happening is that a part of your soul is trying to speak to you through the projection of that person. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through symbols, and often the person you can't stop thinking about is not merely them at all. It's your own unclaimed energy, your unlived desires, your unhealed patterns personified. Mutual thinking then becomes a portal not just to connection, but to revelation. If they're thinking about you too, it's because the energetic field between you still holds unresolved frequency, a soul contract, or a shared psychic terrain where transformation is still unfolding. As you begin to explore the signs like sudden emotional waves, dreaming of them, hearing their name repeatedly, or feeling a strange calm when their memory surfaces, you're being invited into your own initiation. These experiences aren't just coincidences. They're clues from your inner world, asking you to look deeper, to listen to what your intuition already knows, but your mind might not yet grasp. And when that pull becomes too loud to ignore, the real invitation is not to chase the other person, but to reclaim your own psychic energy, to integrate the archetype they represent in your story. That's when everything shifts. The obsession dissolves, the haunting presence quiets, and what's left is something sacred, not a wound, but a thread. A soul thread, one that no longer binds you in longing, but connects you to meaning. In that moment, you don't just return to yourself, you recognize that you were never lost to begin with. The other person was simply the mirror, and the mirror, once understood, reflects not a face, but a truth. This is what it means to come home to the self, not by severing connection, but by understanding its deeper purpose. The moment mutual thought leads you back to your own center, that's the moment the soul awakens and says, I remember who I am. And if you've seen these signs in your own life, those sudden thoughts, dreams, or deep emotional shifts, you're not crazy. And it's not just coincidence. As Carl Jung taught, the psyche speaks in symbols, synchronicities, and energy, not always in words. When two souls are deeply connected, distance and silence can't sever that bond. So trust your intuition. It may be whispering truths your mind hasn't yet understood. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more powerful insights on the unseen forces guiding our lives. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next soul awakening message.